Well, here we are. Now we got a few games under their belt for a little bit. Kevin Durant, that is, with the Phoenix Suns, getting our first impressions of it a little bit. Really, really entertaining game the other night against Dallas. It was a 130 to 126 Phoenix win. Of course, the big story has been Katie's addition there and adjustment, but I mean, it's also been Devin Booker as well. I think he's averaging 36 points over the last week. So certainly an early beneficiary, but Nick Gryniewicz, of course, here for Justin this week. We'll do all the intro a little bit on, but of course, if you're watching the video version, you know what it is. That's not Justin Cousart talking to me, but I mean, before we get in really more of the X's and O's of the fits with Phoenix and what we've seen so far, man, I don't know that we'll get it the way the seating is kind of stacked right now, but I wish there was a way to get round two of Phoenix and Dallas. We know there's the bad blood, of course, from last year. Dallas, really a chippy series overall, but then the fact that Dallas just chumped them in that game 7. Obviously Phoenix coming back this year, you can tell there's a big chip on their shoulder, to say the least, when it comes to that. But I mean, that feels like the best NBA rivalry right now, right? Like, I'm trying to think of, two teams that maybe just have that sheer disdain for each other. And I mean, the only other one that's close to me is the Warriors and the Grizz. Like, those are the
Right.
two that I think of. But man, Book and Luka chirping a little bit at the end of the game, like, we're getting ready for the playoffs. That's what this feels like, at least a little bit.
Yeah, the NBA season is long, but you could tell these teams all know that they're kind of in the stretch run here, and the Suns starting to feel themselves a little bit. You've got Paul, you've got Book, you got KD, of course, coming back, and they're starting to feel it. But I think you're right. Like, there's of course like a little bad blood between the Warriors and the Suns too, right? Like, those two teams have kind of had their run-ins as well. I'm trying to think if there is a better one than that. Maybe it's kind of Golden State and Denver, but yeah, I mean, when you start thinking about a Phoenix and Mavericks series, and just at the quick look right now, like right now they're 4-7, like that would be in the Western Conference Finals. I'm not quite sure if that's going to happen, but it would be a really fun series, and kind of the West as a whole, top to bottom. Just there'd be a lot of fun, kind of cool matchups there after the play-in, and even as it is now, I mean, Dallas, Clippers, Pelicans, and Jazz, kind of your first play-in matchups there too. I mean, that's kind of fun as well. So as we hit the stretch run here, the playoff matchups kind of look like they could be really entertaining.
Oh, and so with Phoenix, I mean, right off the rip, I think the concern was when they traded for KD, if there was one, is that they sapped their depth, which, of course, you just have to do to get a player of that caliber. I just don't think it matters. Like, once the rotation shorten up like that, like, I'm just already, my thing was with KD and Book is, how do you stop both of them? And once you add somebody of Kevin Durant's gravity, it just makes life for somebody like DeAndre Ayton so much easier. It just allows Chris Paul to really just, be the pure point guard and be worried more about putting these guys in the right position, getting them the ball in the places where they need to have it. It's just relieved all pressure. And look, I understand it, but I just have a hard time, because it's like, even if you swarm KD again, look what it's already done for Book in terms of his gravity. Like we said, 30, 40 points a game in these early ones so far. So I get it necessarily. Maybe they're not, 8, 9 deep when you look at the top of the conference, the way that, or I guess at the top of the league as a whole, when you look at like a Milwaukee, or you look at a Boston, or you look at Denver. But I don't know that it matters with a duo that's strong. I mean, if anything, it feels like, just because of how unceremonious Brooklyn ended, and with KD getting swept out last year, that in a way it feels like he's probably become reslept on. Like, this is still an argument, or a strong contender for the best player in the league. It just opens things up. Like, the Phoenix offense was just stagnant. It felt like they need to get a boost. Obviously, this is the ultimate boost, adding Kevin Durant. Again, I don't know. In a conference where it's super loaded, and you've got a team like Denver at the top, I don't want to just pronounce them as the runaway favorites. You've got the Warriors lurking here too, but it sure looks like they're ready to make a finals run, and already just a couple games that, yeah, I've any remote fears I have already been kind of taken away. Like, this team is ready. They're playoff made, and I feel like they can take this thing all the way if they want to.
Yeah, the depth questions don't matter. They don't. Like, what's the old saying when you get to the postseason? Like, play six or trust six, maybe play 7.
It
Something
matters
like
with your
that.
margin for error. Like that's it. That's the only thing. So like, for example, with Boston, if Tatum has an off night, I'll use a microcosm, not to keep going back to this game. So I want to keep like, it's like when you what's the word when you like take the whip and you just beat yourself, you like flog yourself almost. But that's
Flatulation. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
right word
yeah,
there.
something like
Yeah,
that. Well,
whatever
that's
it
what,
is.
yeah. The Sixers that one game when Tatum was hurt or when Tatum was kind of bad. I know he had the game winner, but for most of that game he was awful. But Boston has that margin for error where it's like Jaylen Brown can carry. A lot of their depth was there too. Brogdon had a great game. Derek White had a great game. Teams like that, that's where the depth to me does matter. Where it's like if your top 3 guys are off, you can lose. I mean, the Sixers, not to keep using them and hometown bias as an example, but when they beat the Bucks the other night, Harden, Embiid, Maxey, absolutely crazy. All 3 of them looked like bona fide stars. I mean, Harden and Embiid had 38 and 10 each. I think this is the first time that's happened for the Sixers since the 60s. If that doesn't go, that margin for error is so slim. It's like, where else do you get it from? And I guess like that would be my only concern with Phoenix, but I'm just not as worried about that. Like their top guys are so elite and I think they have enough. Like I think their starting lineup gives them enough depth. And like you said, you get even any sort of contribution off the bench, it feels like you're going to be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you're in a playoff game and Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Chris Paul all suck. Like you're probably going to lose anyway, right? I mean, like if you're take Kevin Durant out of it, you've got the depth. If Booker and Paul aren't playing well, probably going to lose that game anyway. Probably what makes it more impressive is that Phoenix was able to do that deal and still keep DeAndre Ayton, so they still have some size as well. Like usually when you make a trade like that, there's a glaring weakness that you have. And usually that weakness isn't depth. It's like, all right, we don't have size or we don't have the perimeter defense that we need. I mean, they still keep a Torrey Craig. And also, there are some other guys that are kind of on this roster that are interesting. Like TJ Warren is still buried on the bench. And we've seen TJ Warren go back to bubble TJ Warren. Like he can get buckets himself too. So let's say there is a game where KD is in foul trouble, Chris Paul isn't feeling it, and Devin Booker's off. Like TJ Warren has shown in the past that he can go off and win a playoff game for you. So I think Phoenix has some more options necessarily than, really you can, you would think when you look top to bottom. I know as a Magic guy, like I probably watched a little more Terrence Ross the last 5 years than some other people. Maybe the Terrence Ross the last 2 years we're not talking about, but there's another guy that in a playoff game could probably give you 20 something if he starts hitting shots.
They're going to have a good stretch coming up because it's been, 3-0 since Durant's been in the lineup. 2 of those wins are against Charlotte and Chicago, obviously teams that are trending down. And then the 4-point win against Dallas the other night. They've got OKC coming up. OKC's fighting for a bubble spot right now. Sacramento, of course, is fighting for positioning. They've got Golden State and then Milwaukee before they've got Orlando on March 16th. So, we're at the point now where I guess post All-Star game is the joke. Really, I say post Super Bowl. I guess maybe post Christmas if you really want to stretch it. But I mean, that's when the regular season heats up. This is when we start having the true takeaways when teams start to round into playoff form. And so we're going to get to see that here a little bit of Phoenix. I mean, I know there's an adjustment period, but they're going to have to find that out real quick because really this is wide open. I mean, in the Western Conference, Denver is pretty much in the driver's seat for one. I mean, they're 6.5 up on Memphis right now, 7.5 up on Sacramento, but Phoenix is at 4 right now. They've got a 2-game cushion on the Warriors, but like we said, only 2 back of Sacramento, only 3 back of Memphis. And we're going to talk Memphis here in a second, but of course, a whole lot going on there right now. It's up for grabs. To the same token, you got to worry about going on a streak. They're only 2 up on the Warriors, 2.5 up on the Timberwolves, the Mavericks, Clippers, both looming as well. Like, teams still have to try, but it sure feels like, you want to see what it's going to look like. There's always an adjustment period, but I think it also helps too, just with KD in particular. I mean, one of the most, maybe the most in the league, honestly, a guy where you can just plug in and play him anywhere. I mean, you put in any system you want, KD's going to run it. There aren't many guys who can do that, so maybe there is less of an adjustment period here on the fly. I still think it's them in Denver. I've been a big Denver guy all year. I've really been beating the drum. I think they're healthy. I think they're putting it together. I'm not about to just discount them, but early Phoenix returns look good. We're going to see this next week, but I don't know. I don't know what you throw at KD and Book. I just think that's too much right there. Like
Yeah.
that can turn into 85 points in the blink of an eye, and it'll look like the easiest 85 points of all time. Welcome everybody to the Driving Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rafuse. Joining me as always, usually my co-host Justin Cousart. Justin takes a much deserved break. Justin's actually at spring training right now, so he's living the dream. He's at Clearwater. He's at the beach. Little spring training baseball. Our Phillies looking good. Everything else in sports world has been bad for me recently. So, got to find the little victories here and there. But in his absence, or in his stead, I should say, Nick Gryniewicz, play-by-play voice of the Lakeland Magic. You've heard him here on the podcast. If you ever listen to Orlando radio, you might know him as Nicky Football. But yeah, he's here today, filling in. We got a whole lot to talk about, so don't want to waste any time. We got Ja Morant coming up, of course, a whole lot going on there. I don't even know where to begin. We'll save all that. A couple of injuries as well we want to get into. Of course, LeBron, LaMelo out for the year. Our friend Jonathan Issac in Orlando can't catch a break. Going to do some who's balling, who's falling as well. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. I'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, y'all know the drill. Anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. Or search the Driving Dish NBA podcast on YouTube as well. You can see the video version. And now a word from our sponsors. All right, so I remember when the first Ja Morant story broke, and that was the Indiana one where it was an athletic article, and they said that he potentially confronted Indiana Pacers staff after the game. There were reports of a laser. They felt unsafe, but no charges were ever pressed. And you're like, all right. We talked about it a little bit on the show, but with no charges being pressed, you don't want to jump on too much. But it really, then the story about the Foot Locker came out. 17-year-old kid. Apparently they got into a fight at the pickup game, and they went to confront him after. Maybe these are two separate stories at this point, and then it just culminates now to the point where, I'm sure everyone's seen it at this point, the Instagram live video, Ja Morant shirtless in the strip club, pointing up the pistol on Instagram live. Like, no question about it. Right next to his head, holding it like a stack of money, like a money phone, if you're ever familiar with that. But like we said, posted on his Instagram account, broadcast to the world. They were coming off a game in Denver. So I don't know whether this is in Memphis or Colorado off the top of my head, but I know they just played Denver.
They were in Denver.
Okay, so they were in Denver when that happened. Now they're potentially, the police are looking into it. I can't speak to whether the gun is legally registered or not. I'm not sure that that's out there yet at this point. He has not been arrested. I think that that's worth mentioning, is that, no criminal charges have been filed at this point, but the team suspended him for 2 games at this point. Ja Morant's put a statement out basically saying that he's going to take time away. This could very well be indefinite. This is a Grizzlies team who's been kind of spiraling over the last few months. But really, when I just look at Ja Morant, I'm just wondering why. And that's been my reaction the whole time, has been, I don't understand why Ja Morant is doing this. We talked, I just think about where we were earlier this year. We talk about like Ja's sneaker coming out and him giving them to the kids of the game, and him being the number 7 jersey, like he's one of the faces in the league, and then you just have sheer stupidity like this, and there's no other way to describe it. This is absolutely insane. Ja Morant is in a situation where you can make generational wealth as an NBA star, tens, hundreds, potentially millions of dollars to set your family up forever, and you're running around in the strip club with a gun. I don't understand the logic. I don't get the thinking here. And I hope at this point that Ja Morant has people around him that genuinely care about him, because that's what Ja Morant needs right now. He needs people. I thought Jalen Rose had a really good monologue about it. I hope that he doesn't blow this situation, because he is one of the bright young stars of the league. He is a guy that a lot of people have grown to love. His posters are on every highlight reel ever. But yeah, this is a pattern at this point, Nick. Like, there's no running from it. And it is disturbing to see an NBA's young star like this running around in the strip club with a pistol. There's just, it's unnecessary behavior. And that's the most, like, Ja Morant had a great upbringing. He's had a great life, and it's only going to be better. He's an NBA star.
Yeah, it's nuts.
I don't want to speak to what someone is going through. Like, you never know what's going on behind the scenes, but I do know that this is absolutely insane. And that I really hope someone gets to him before he throws this all away, because that's the path that you're on right now when he's doing this type of behavior.
Yeah, and you hear the stories as well about, what, a couple weeks ago, the players only meeting, and Steven Adams, who's the vet on that team, kind of imploring everyone to be smarter on the road and start buttoning it up while they kind of get to the stretch run of the season. And the reports are that Steven Adams is talking to one person only. That was John Morant. And really, the the Memphis Grizzlies, like in terms of where they are in the standings, they may look like a contender. In terms of how they look on the court when John Morant's there, they may be a contender. You're not going to win a championship when your best player and the face of your franchise is dealing with something like this, A, off the court, but also B, when you're kind of relying on him to be that steady hand. And I think what we've really seen is John Morant display a great deal of immaturity and a lack of good decision making. That's it. You kind of said you hope that there's someone around him that cares about him. I think that through the events we've seen here, I don't know how many people are around John Morant with Ja's best interest in mind. Like when you're going to when your mother is calling you because she's having a disagreement with someone at a Foot Locker and you show up 9 deep for for what? Like, what are you showing up to Foot Locker with 9 people for? Like, what's going to? It seems to me that John Morant needs to start kind of, I would say, you know, tightening up the circle. And I don't know if it's I don't know if it's him. He's the one with the gun in the club. So I don't want to put this on anybody else, but someone needs to grab John Morant and say, "Hey, man, you signed a contract to be worth up to $250 million. That's with a B, $250 million. You've got, your Nike shoe that's supposed to come out on April 1st. Think they're going to push that back, by the way? I would think maybe we're going to push that debut date back for the sneaker.
I don't, because it's tough, because I don't want to bury John Morant either. John Morant's 23 years old. Like,
yeah,
this
exactly.
This is strike one. Like, this has been all relatively here in the last little bit. Like, he's lost the benefit of the doubt, especially with the gun in the strip club. Like, that to me, there's no X and O there. That's just unnecessary behavior all around. But I don't like.
Well, it seems to me
it's not
Kevin,
Kyrie Irving, I guess, to that point. Like, it's not Kyrie where this is strike 500, where it's like, okay, we know what this is at this point. I'm hoping someone tells John Morant, yo, you have everything to lose. That's the biggest thing. Is it's like all these people around you, you're right, they don't have anything to lose. They are who they are at this point. Ja, like, too much is given, much is expected. And it is, maybe it is
he needs to be the one
sometimes.
making the decisions. Like, if he's the one that's not calling the shots in that group, right? Like, he is the one with everything to lose. He needs to make the right calls.
Like, you just don't need to do this. Everyone already, like, you're already liked, you're already respected. Like, you don't need to run around being the tough guy. Like, who's being impressed by this right now? I guess that's my thing, is like, who's running around and going, yo, this is the behavior that I'm looking for. This is exactly who I want to be. Like, John Morant flaming out of the league isn't cool to anybody.
No one wants to see that, right? I mean, no one wants to see he's one of the most exciting players in the game right now. I mean, you hope that John Morant becomes, everything that we expected, and that is perhaps one of the next faces of the league. Like, we are in that transition period right now in the NBA where, Steph's 34, LeBron's in year 20. Who's that next generation? I mean, Zion Williamson can't get on the floor. I mean, you've got that kind of middle group right now of Giannis and Embiid and Harden. But really, I mean, in terms of the young guys that are in their first few years in the league, John Morant is posed to become one of the true faces of the National Basketball Association. But he's got to make the right decisions. He's got to, stay away from situations like this. And, listen, I have no idea. I'm not on the inside there. I'm watching this from the outside in. But, the people around Ja do have to have his best interests as well. Like, when your mom is calling you saying, hey, I'm having some trouble at Foot Locker here, I don't know. It seems to me like there's, his dad's chirping with Shannon Sharp on the sidelines. Like, I mean, it seems like there've been some complaints there in terms of kind of stuff going on with his group at the FedEx Forum too. One of his friends got banned from the FedEx Forum there too. There's a lot when you start digging into the different storylines. Like, not one individual story is a big deal, but them grouped together is where you start seeing there's something that's maybe systemic here.
Yeah, well, and it starts to, part of why we loved this Grizzlies team, right? Is the energy and the toughness that they play with and their swagger and their confidence. And, they're not going to take smack from anybody. And that does make them endearing. Like, I don't want to run away from that necessarily, but it really does feel like this year in particular, within the last like 3-4 months, that the antics have really started to just spill over into a distraction on the actual basketball court, to where it's like, yo, there are expectations now. Like, you got to win too. Like, all that tough guy doesn't matter if you keep losing these meaningful games. I think in a way that's where Golden State's been able to take it out of them, especially a lot of times, has been able to, when you've got Klay Thompson talking trash, just, one of the more reserved guys in the league. You've got a couple, I mean, even back recently, I look at that Dylan Brooks interview where he talked about Draymond Green. He's just like, where he was talking about, he's like, I hate him and he wouldn't be good anywhere else. It's like, look, I know it's a rivalry, but at some point we got to back it up. Like, we know you guys don't like each other. That's fine. We like the rivalries in the NBA. Like I said, I'm talking about, I'm not going to sit here and say that I like the hype between Phoenix and Dallas and then not say that I want some of that with the Grizz as well. But it does feel like the extracurricular, like,
yeah, the
it's
noise.
Like using
the noise
Draymond is like using Draymond as a microcosm. Like, that's the extracurriculars. When it takes over the on court, it becomes a problem. It's become a problem with the Grizzlies. Like, I do feel like there's a little bit more posturing than there is about X's and O's at this point. It is a young locker room. It's a lot of guys who got good fast, had a lot of success in the NBA right away. They have together. You mentioned there aren't a lot of vets in that locker room. Steven Adams is the only guy I can think of. And, you're right. I do think collectively this is where they're at a push comes to shove moment. And I think they're going to respond. I still believe in Ja Morant and all these guys, but I do think hopefully that they take a reflection here, or take some time here and step back and look at what it is, because this season could be lost. Like we said, they've only got a game up. If we're talking basketball, they're a game up on the Kings right now for 2. You slip down to a 3 or a 4, you might run into the Warriors. You might run into the Suns first round. Like, these all of a sudden get more difficult series than we're talking about. Like, the play-in's already going to be hard enough in the West. And on top of that, to make from when it all can't get any worse, Brandon Clark tore his Achilles and is out for the season.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing too. I mean, this is the part of the year where, nothing is going to be given to you. I mean, when you start looking at the standings, but I mean, you want to know about a team's maturity, Kevin, look at what their road record is. I mean, this is a Memphis team that's 26-5 at home. They're 12-20 on the road. And that's what Steven Adams is talking about. Hey, like, when you go on the road, it's a business trip. I mean, we need to be focused on taking care of business. And I think when you start talking about all of the noise, around this team, that's when it kind of gets you when you go on the road. Then you lose a guy in Brandon Clark, who has been a big part of them on both sides of the court. So, I mean, he's someone that they're definitely going to miss. You don't know how long Ja Morant's going to be out. Like this, I know it was initially 2 games, but Taylor Jenkins came out, was it today, yesterday, and, was not definitive on a timeline for Ja Morant's return. Like, there are a lot of boxes I think they need to check, before he does come back and things get figured out. And, they kind of wait out the news cycle on this as well. So that's a big loss. And, when you start taking Brandon Clark out and Ja Morant's gone and stuff, this team starts, it's a completely different roster at that point in time.
Yeah, Brandon Clark averaging 19.5 minutes a game, 10 points a game. Definitely going to be missed there. Like we said, they got Adams, they got Jaren Jackson. But, when you talk about that depth, come
really
playoff
good
time,
defender. Really good defender.
Yeah, he's been solid. I mean, 4 years now, he's been a big a part of this as anybody. He's just, like we said, been really dependable, especially on the defensive end. Shooting a career high effective field goal percentage this year, averages pretty much consistent to what he's done for most of it. 8 starts this year. So, but like we said, huge off the bench. Ja Morant, like we said, I don't know. You mentioned we'll see 2 games for now. I do think it'll go longer. Unless, until charges get filed, or if something gets filed, I don't think we're looking at potentially losing the season or anything like that, nor should we. At the end, like, Ja Morant is 23 years old. I firmly believe, and I say this now that I'm older, and it's cracking up because we had the first 2 seasons, we were not. All that talk about how you're not an adult until you're 25 years old, I'm a firm believer in that. I truly, truly don't believe that I was an adult till I was 25 years old. Ja Morant's got a lot to lose. He's got a lot to gain. And I hope that he heeds the advice from a lot of people around him. I remember how tumultuous it got for Iverson at points in Philly. And I know even back then, obviously it's a much different era. There are new wrinkles now and plenty of new elements with social media, with, being able to broadcast every moment. But in the case of Ja Morant, this is a self-inflicted wound. This was no pun intended. Please, no bad pun intended. He was on Instagram Live. Like, you did
He
this.
broadcasted it. Absolutely. This wasn't somebody else. He leaked this.
And especially when he vehemently denied the other gun stories. Like, why? There are not scenarios in general where you need to have the gun in the club or in the strip club. Like, this is just, you need to move better, period. Like, point blank, period. Because Ja's got a lot to lose. Like, it's not going to be funny for like, that's the thing, is like, we all lose if Ja Morant goes out like this. Like, no one gains if he ends up, God forbid, having to do prison time or anything like that, or flames out of his NBA career. Like, there's a whole lot to lose. I still have faith. Like, he's very young. I'm hoping the league and the Grizzlies and his teammates too. I really hope his teammates get to him, because they've been a big part of this together.
Adam Silver. If I'm Adam Silver, I'm calling him to New York. Come on to the league office. I mean,
it's a big test with Adam Silver, because we've seen how David Stern does with this. Like, David Stern did it with Melo.
David Stern had the meeting. Yeah.
Do you remember that? Did you remember David Stern's Melo meeting back in the day? Have you ever heard Carmelo talk about that?
I haven't heard Melo talk about it, but I mean, I've heard plenty of other people talk
Carmelo
about it.
talked about it when he got suspended. I forget whose podcast he was on, because this clip came up recently, and it was real funny. Because, like, Carmelo, for those who don't remember, this was in like 05 or 06, but Carmelo Anthony was in a Stop Snitching video in Baltimore. It was like one of those, like, it was one of the DVDs, and Melo just goes, David Stern pulled me in, and he pulls up the video clip. And he's just pointing him out, and he starts naming his friends. So mind you, this is in Baltimore. This is in a certified bad area.
Yeah.
And he just goes, I know what he's doing. I know what he's doing. I know what he's got here. I know who's got the gun. I know who's this, and this. I got to suspend you. And he just basically, like, hit him with the Godfather type offer. And it's like, we haven't seen that from Adam Silver necessarily.
Well, no, because Adam Silver is the guy that wants to be all the players' friends. You know what I mean? Like,
and potentially the Disney CEO, if you believe the latest reports coming out.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think so either. But I'll tell you what, if there's one gig that you might leave the NBA for, with Disney having Marvel and Star Wars now, it's kind of a money printing machine. You even have to try. You don't have to try with Disney anymore.
It's a good point. It's a good
point. Marvel
hasn't
been trying for like all of Phase 4, it feels like, and they're still printing money.
But I mean, and by the way, like, that meeting with Carmelo Anthony I mean, that's not the one reason Carmelo made the right decisions, but I mean, that's what you need to do, I think, with Ja Morant, is bring him in and say, hey, Ja, like, we have all of these separate individual instances, and this is a trend now. And
you just don't need to do this. That's what it all comes down to. Is none of this is necessary. Being the tough guy is not cool. Like, you don't need to be the tough guy. None of this is that. No one's asking Ja Morant to be that. Play basketball. Like, this is what you're here for. We all like you. We all want you to be great. Be a tough guy on the
floor. Just be a tough guy on the floor. That's it. Off the floor. Just stay out of trouble.
Yeah, you just got too much to lose, and that's what you never want to see happen. All right, who's balling, who's falling? Our NBA version of the stock market. We always like to start with the good before the bad. So balling for me this week. I talked Julius Randle a few weeks ago, but you got to talk about the Knicks. They are balling for me this week. 9 in a row as of recording this podcast. Most notably, the double overtime win, 131-127 over Boston last night. Emmanuel quickly going absolutely bonkers. But Julius Randle continuing his excellent run of play as well. RJ Barrett's really looked great. Healthy Mitchell Robinson. I don't know what's been in the water since they brought Josh Hart over. We knew he and Brunson were really good buds at Nova, and Brunson's been hooping all year. But I mean, yeah, you got the Knicks, third game back at Cleveland right now. They still got some work to do if they want to catch the Sixers. But the fact that they're within striking distance, they've got a good 2-game cushion on Brooklyn right now, a solid 4.5 for the play-in game at this point. They're peaking at the right time. Again, you talk about going into March and in post All-Star break. I think there will be rightly some questions given their last playoff appearance about, there will be some, hey, we got to step up and do it here. But I mean, given the way they're playing right now, if it breaks like this and we get Cleveland Knicks first round, that'd be a hell of a first round series. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, and I thought Cleveland was going to be the team that'd be kind of peaking at the right time, kind of like how the Knicks are playing right now. But yeah, you don't have Jalen Brunson. You beat the Celtics the other night. New York has just kind of everything rolling, and this doesn't feel like a traditional Tibbs team. Like they score, they score the
Yeah.
basketball, and they still defend. But I mean, the funny thing is R.J. Barrett, who's a lottery pick for this team, is a virtual afterthought, even after the Josh Hart trade and bringing him in there. And what Quickly did the other day, I'm not sure what the odds are on him winning sixth man of the year, kind of where he is in that, but he's been just such a great story this year for New York, and you can start to feel that city waking up and kind of coming around on him too. It's fun when the Knicks are good. When the Knicks are good, the NBA is in a good place. Madison Square Garden is exciting, so that was fun to watch the other night.
Yeah, I mean like you said, it would without a doubt be electric. I mean, really any of those matchups look to be pretty good. I mean, they're not going to slide, but even if they're at 6, like, Milwaukee and Boston are going to be 1 and 2, putting something drastic. I know Boston's been skidding recently, but relax. I don't think they're going to skid that far. And Brooklyn, I don't think, obviously going in the wrong direction too. Post KD trade, a radically different squad. I know they're still playing pretty inspired. Jock Vaughn's got them going, but I don't know. I don't know if Miami catches them. I don't know if Atlanta catches up. Atlanta's probably a little too far back, especially the Knicks at this point is too far back. But yeah, they certainly look like that's got the potential for a really great 4-5 matchup. All right, who is balling for you this week?
Paolo Banchero, man. By God.
Oh yeah.
The rookie of the year, that's what he's going to be. Paolo Banchero, the rookie of the month in February. First Magic player to win rookie of the month, I think I saw, since Shaquille O'Neal. Just kind of nuts. It's been a while. We've had a lot of rookies since then. I'm surprised one of them hasn't won rookie of the month since then. But Paolo is just a ton of fun to watch. He had 37 the other night in a win over Charlotte. I think 24-25 in the loss to Portland last night. A game I thought the Magic might come away and win without Wendell Carter Jr. Listen, I mean, whether it's Paolo or it's Franz, good young core there in Orlando, or here in Orlando, I guess. But Paolo is definitely balling.
Yeah, I mean, he's the shoo-in for rookie of the year. That's the thing is, it's like, I mean, the whole billing with Paolo is that he was the most NBA ready, and he's just been super NBA ready. The Magic have, I don't want to say stalled, because that's the wrong word. Because they are still a very young team. It's their core is coming together, a lot of young guys. I think Jamal Mosley's doing a good job. But I think maybe, I don't know. Does it feel like the expectations took off a little too early? Like,
yeah,
I feel
they're
like
kind of running out of juice, right? Yeah, just I mean, that's kind of what happens to young teams this part of the season.
Yeah, they pushed the play-in spot, and I think there were a lot of people who could, maybe argue that they'd sneak in around 9 or 10. They're a solid 3.5 back from Washington at this point. But even still, you've got Chicago and India ahead of them too. But to that token, I mean, it is worth mentioning here that there's a big gap between what the bottom 4 that are wobbling for Wemby. You know what I mean? Like, the Magic are not in those sweepstakes by any means. And just the fact too that they're so well set up for the future. The fact that they have the 2 first-round picks, you just mentioned Chicago. I mean, whether you want to move up, whether you just draft 2 starters and kind of go around Paolo, like, I mean, the last time they had 2 picks, you've already got 1 guaranteed hit with Franz Wagner. Jalen Suggs still kind of up in the air. Not really what I expected out of those 2, that to be so far. But yeah, I mean, Paolo for sure, runaway rookie of the year without a doubt. I mean, who's even close at this point?
I couldn't tell you.
Like Keegan Murray's played good.
Yeah, like, I mean,
Matthew Ern's played good.
It's just,
it
is. It's a runaway for Paolo. I mean, and we think about the other rookies who are having nice seasons. That's great. The Magic have also kind of won enough too, where you're not just giving it to a player that's on a really awful team that's putting up some empty numbers. So yeah, it's definitely Paolo.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, like, there were 27 wins. Portland's at 30, OKC's at 30, LA's at 31. So yeah, like, there is that. It is. We really talk about those 4. Like, everybody was talking about this being a historic tank race. It really has just come down to 4 teams at this point. And that's where it's been. Fallen for me is the Clippers, 3-7 in the last 10. They finally did break their winning streak, or their losing streak, I should say, the other night, getting a win over the Grizzlies, 135-129. Before that, though, 5 losses in a row. The Kings twice. One of them, of course, being that 176 to 175 barn burner. They lost the Nuggets, the Warriors, and the Timberwolves. Everyone was bullying on Russ right away, of course. Started 0-5. I don't know. They've got the Raptors tonight. Those are a lot of losses when their Clippers are adding a new starter into the mix. But I guess that was kind of my worry with it all the whole time, right? Is that you're adding an ingredient that, yeah, it might work, but did you have to add it? Like, that was always my thing with Russell Westbrook is you had, especially the way they were going into the break, like you had one of the best lineups in terms of efficiency when you had KG. Wow, geez, what year is it? Kawhi Leonard, PG, and Terrence Mann on the floor. And you've taken Mann's minutes away and given them to Russ. And, I know the one game you have Kawhi going, but it's just like I look at the way the Warriors and Dre in particular, like they're not guarding him. Come playoff times, that is going to matter. We've seen this with 4 separate teams now at this point. Like, I think he's got to be limited to strictly bench minutes. I think it's got to go back to that. Like, if you want to do that, you're fine. But I mean, when they try to work him in as a starter right away, it just feels like this is an unnecessary hurdle for the Clippers. And I do. A team that I really thought could win the whole thing has made it obviously super difficult on themselves.
You put it the best way. You asked the question, or you said, yeah, you did it, but did you have to? That's kind of how I felt about the last 2 teams that have brought in Russell Westbrook, where it's like, yeah, you brought him in. He's available for a reason. And you always know with him, the fit is going to be more about volume than it is going to be, about kind of quality there. It is more of quantity in terms of the amount of shots he takes. No one is going to guard him in the playoffs. He can shoot you out of games, that's for sure. And teams are going to be totally okay to let him, kind of shoot from 3 as much as possible. So I know that Kawhi and more important, like Paul George really championed getting him there. I think that, if you're Ty Lue, you had to have been calling up the front office saying, hey, like, please don't. Like, I don't want to manage this. No thanks. And then again, coaches always think they can be the one that fixed the situation too. So, I mean, that's always, coaches have to be protected from themselves, but it's been a horrible fit, for Russell Westbrook in the state of California. And I don't see it getting any better. I don't know why you put him on this roster. I don't, because it just makes no sense. I'd rather have Patrick Beverley. They traded away. So Pat Bev's a better fit than Russ.
I can't believe we're there. And you may not entirely be wrong, but like, yeah, it's unnecessary. It's just what, I mean, that feels like the theme of this episode, but it was unnecessary. And I'm glad that I think Russ is happy to be there. And I like that he's like, I think Russ is great in the locker room.
Yeah. Guys like him. I would hate playing
That's
with
kind of
him,
where it stops.
but guys like him. That's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Who has fallen for you this week?
This is kind of like, this is Clippers related, but load management fallen for me. Like the NBA narrative of load management, how it's hurting the league is kind of really starting to take over. Like, it's been a louder talking point this year, especially after how bad the All-Star game was. I think it's been louder this year than we've seen in the past. And Paul George comes out with, I forget what show he was on or what, but with this comment about how, he played for kind of, a blue collar team and, you played and you built these calluses, on your body when you practiced hard. And he was talking about playing for the Frank Vogel, Indiana Pacer teams. But I mean, now here he is, he's on the Clippers. He's playing with Kawhi Leonard. And I think he'll play like 50 games this year. Right. It does amaze me kind of how, the load management part of the league has really kind of taken over, and guys just don't play as many games. They don't. And it seems as if the masses have identified that that's a real problem with the consumption of the NBA. They're losing viewers. And it's kind of a bummer to see even players coming out and saying, was Jaylen Brown after the All-Star game saying that wasn't basketball. It wasn't. And a lot of it just has to do with the effort from guys. So that's fallen for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I mean, I think Anthony Edwards talked about it a little bit, but I think KD had mentioned it too, where, you had guys in the 90s were playing every single game. And, with all the, like, we have more sports science, we have better medical teams, better doctors, better trainers with these teams, with these, with the league than they've ever had before at any point in NBA history. And nevertheless, like, guys are missing time. It doesn't feel like there's been any sort of, there just hasn't been that drastic reduction in injuries to justify it. You know what I mean? And it is tough when, I mean, yeah, the regular season is heating up now, but we're 2/3 into it at this point. Like, we got to wait till after essentially the Super Bowl and the All-Star game to play meaningful minutes. And you're right, for people who pay hard-earned money to go to these games, like, I understand it once in a while. I understand it post injuries on some back-to-backs, but yeah, like, I do think, especially when you're young, there's something to be said about these guys playing in most of these games. Like, I don't know. Until I see some science, like hardcore, that it's benefiting.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at. Like, it is weird that guys in the 70s and 80s, it doesn't feel like weren't getting injured as much. I did read an interesting article about AAU ball and how there's more stress on the joints and stuff like that, and how kids are having, more adult injuries, if you will. Maybe there is something to be said about that. I remember, again, I am not a sports scientist, so please do not take any of this with any sort of medical advice. But I do remember growing up, like, you're not allowed, and I don't know if this is true for you, but like, you're not allowed to lift weights until you're in, like, it was like 8th or 9th grade for us. Where they just kind of like, it was something about like, stunting your growth or
growth plates, that stuff, putting too much stress in your body. Yeah.
And so like, I do wonder, obviously, because with a lot of these kids in the elite programs, like, maybe you do have more of a workload than ever when you're younger. And specifically a lot of with the one sport, type deal, where a lot of these kids will only play basketball instead of, more traditionally growing up, all the NBA stars of the past, you'd play football in the fall, you'd hoop in the winter, you'd maybe run track or do whatever, in the spring. Maybe there's some science behind that. I don't know what it is, but yeah, the NBA has a huge regular season problem right now. And they're not going to shorten it. Like, that's the thing, is they could shorten it and make it less games and make the games more meaningful and almost force these guys to care. I don't know.
Go to 60 games, guys will play 35. I don't know. I actually don't think shortening it. I don't think shortening it will make it any better.
See, I think shortening it would make it better, because I think and then if you shorten it, I think you really like hammer the guys who don't play. Like, if you load manage in a 60-game season when you have all the rest, then at that point, I think you almost step in as a league and punish them. Like, I know it has to be a case by case basis at that point, but you have to do something.
I think it's too hard to do that. The only idea that I heard that I thought would make a difference is you start putting a game minimum on all NBA and those things. And that has direct correlation to these max contracts. So you can't make an all NBA team if you play less than 65 games, let's say. And that's maybe how you handle it. Then guys like, Paul George and, I'm trying to think of good examples. I don't want to just throw names out there, but got Kawhi Leonard, like guys that are load managing like this, that aren't playing, in the second game of a back-to-back all the time. Maybe they're getting into more of these games and at least playing a few minutes so they can get to that 65-game mark. Like, they're at least suiting up, because more often than not, like, you're seeing Kawhi Leonard in street clothes rather than, a game jersey.
No, I mean, he's finally the guy. I mean, it's funny. He's been the face of load management. He's finally the guy we've got back on the floor recently. Yeah. I mean, and I think the trend is turning a little bit. Like we said, comments from, younger stars like Anthony Edwards saying, I want to play every night. That is when guys who are the face of the league, they can change it as well, change the tempo. I get it with injuries, but you're right. The NBA for sure they have to do something, because the regular season product is lacking. There's no way around it. Like, the playoff product is fine. I think, more recently, again, post March right now, I think there's been plenty of games in terms of marquee games, but I think right now there's definitely a long-term issue with that. I don't know what the answer is, but they got to do something for sure. All right, going to the Lakers now. A couple of injuries across the league, but we're gonna bounce back and forth a little bit. But I do want to talk about LeBron. Going out with the foot injury, and this has been, obviously looked really bad right off the rip. They're going to kind of reevaluate in 2 weeks, so I don't want to just say that everything is better and he's going to come back. But, I mean, for me, and I don't know if it was the same with you, but it felt pretty doom and gloomy when LeBron went down, given how much he was doing for this team. We know the roster got better, but they basically needed every game left, more or less, to get back in. Well, the schedule gods and the other teams have kind of broken their way a little bit, to now the point where, I mean, they're tied record-wise with Utah right now. They don't have the tiebreaker, but they're a half game behind New Orleans for 9 and 10. So it is still very much within sight for the Lakers. 6-4 in their last 10. Give Anthony Davis a lot of credit for as much flack as he's gotten this year. He's really stepped up and carried the load for them recently. They got a shot. They got to stay afloat until LeBron gets back. But, they beat OKC the other night. Tough loss to Minnesota, but bouncing back in a big win against Golden State. Again, they've got Memphis coming up tomorrow, who's been reeling, like we said. They've got Toronto. They've got New York. They've got the Pelicans, who are going to be right ahead of them. So, and then Houston as well, obviously, is one of those bottom 4 teams. So, I mean, you got to take 3 or 4 of them if you really want to give this a shot. But their schedule's pretty favorable overall. So, you got to be encouraged if you can tread water with LeBron, because this roster is improved. That's the thing, is it's like, I know the Lakers have stunk most of the year, and that roster up until the trade deadline was not that great. Like, they weren't scaring anybody, nor should they scare anyone per se. But, they get into the playoff spot, they can make, or the play-in spot, listen, you get LeBron and Anthony Davis for 1 game, and they might shake things up a little bit.
Yeah, and you look at their schedule the rest of the way, they still play Utah twice. They've got New Orleans in there one time as well. They get a chance to play Chicago twice, weaker Eastern Conference team. They have my Orlando Magic on there too. So, you get to play Houston. As you mentioned, the schedule gods kind of set this up right. And, maybe you hope to get LeBron back for the last 5-6 games, maybe, of the regular season. Like, I know the evaluation point is still kind of up in the air. So, maybe for the last 2 weeks of the year, you hope to get LeBron back and get into some sort of playoff form. But yeah, I mean, it seems like everyone is playing their way back towards the Lakers. And fortunately, they were able to add to that roster a little bit, right? Get Jared Vanderbilt, in a trade. He's been kind of a nice piece for them as well. Yeah, I think if you're the NBA, like, you're rooting for LA to make that spot, right? I mean, you want to see the Lakers in the play-in. Like, that's what Adam Silver wants to see. I think that's what the casual fan wants to see. I don't think that there's a long thought from the NBA league in terms of who would you rather have, the Lakers or the Jazz in the play-in. And, you get a chance, LeBron versus Zion in the play-in. That'd be a lot of fun too.
Oh, they got to get Zion back. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the Pelicans, we're talking about them. They're treading right there. I know Brandon Ingram's back, but, that's a real question, it feels like, for the rest of the season. That was an early, darling story of the league. And now they're talking about hanging right there. Those other 2 spots above it, I think, are a little more solidified with Dallas and the Clippers. Even in spite of the Clippers' struggles, I think they get in. Dallas will figure it out with Kyrie and Luka. They're not going to flame out or anything. I mean, yeah, Utah would be the one that you think would just, it kind of reminds me of Orlando a little bit. Like, they're running out of juice, right? Like, Utah, we expected them to be near the bottom of the league this year. They've been one of the more surprise stories. I mean, they were been as high as 3 or 4 in the West at one point, but at the end of the day, as great of a breakout season as Lauri Markkanen has had, you just can't really, even post trade deadline with some of the guys they sold off, it's just, you don't really expect them to jump up as much. It would be disappointing for New Orleans if they flamed out. I do think they get in for what it's worth. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're the league, if you're Adam Silver from a ratings perspective, of course you want the Lakers in there, which I'm sure every smaller market team is groaning about right now. And I mean, OKC and Portland are in the mix there too as well. It'd be interesting if Dame gets in, but I think the Lakers, of all those teams that we mentioned, other than maybe New Orleans if you get Zion back, but when I look at Utah and OKC and Portland and the Lakers, I just think the Lakers have easily the most upside out of all that. Like, I could see the Lakers maybe upsetting an 8 seed and sneaking in, and then they're not going to beat Denver, but they would at least make it interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it kind of gets back to, the bubble Lakers, right? I mean, it's LeBron, it's AD, and then kind of what a reward that would be for Denver, though. Hey, you're the 1 seed, you're 6.5 games better right now than Memphis, and you get LeBron and AD
like,
in
who do you
the first
want,
round.
though? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Who are the Western Conference, if you could target and pick your poison? I mean, is it Memphis the way they're falling? That feels silly. I mean, Sacramento is the number 3 seed right now. I know they have the least experience, but it's like the way they've been checking boxes all year. It's like, if I have a concern about Sacramento, it's their defense in the playoffs, but I still don't think I'm going out of my way to pick them when they keep winning games. De'Aaron Fox has been statistically one of the best players in crunch time moments this year. Golden State's the defending champ. Like, Is
Yeah.
it Minnesota? I don't know. They're playing better ball recently. I
No,
don't
it's
know.
Minnesota. It's Minnesota.
I
Like
think it's Minnesota too. I
yeah,
know.
I mean,
It's
like it's
Minnesota.
actually, it's pretty glaring that it's Minnesota, right? I mean, I won't believe it till I see it. I mean, they're much improved this year. And have come
Dallas
kind of,
doesn't scare me a ton this year too, because I think their depth is gone, man. I mean, Kyrie and Luka can light up every night, and so that's the thing is, it's like that duo can win you games on their own. I watched them do it against the Sixers the other night, but I don't know, man. It's again, it comes down to depth. Like if they're not going, if one of them isn't going, they have
Mhm.
no margin for error anymore.
I got a chance to see Luca play in person this year when they played at the Denver Nuggets. I was in Denver visiting my brother, and Luke is so special, like in
Yeah.
person. Like there's nothing that you can do, and he could score 45 a night if he wanted to. But I agree, the depth that team has is kind of an issue. It's him and it's Kyrie, and then things kind of drop off quite a bit. So I mean, they don't scare me, especially in a long series, because those two guys are going to run out of gas.
Yeah, it's the long series thing. Like in a play-in situation, absolutely. In a 7-game series, it just again, it feels like that depth is going to matter. Um, LaMelo Ball is out for the year with this non-stress or non-contact, I should say, ankle injury. I mean, broke his foot, which is crazy. He just basically was doing a crossover, step back, and it gave out. This was a Charlotte team, like we said, 5-5 in their last 10. In the Wemby race, they'd really gained some space here. Detroit and Houston at 15 games, San Antonio's at 16. They're not going to catch anybody else at this point, but they're pretty firmly without LaMelo Ball back to, I would say, for my money, the worst team in the league here pretty quick. I mean, it's definitely worrisome, the fact that, again, that it was non-contact. I mean, LaMelo's been dealing with ankle injuries all year. I mean, really just in terms of the Ball brothers in
Yep.
general, what a brutal year. I mean, LaMelo's at least been playing at times. For Lonzo. Lonzo is a tragedy at this point. At this point, I'm just hoping he can do physical activity, period. I mean, they're at the point where Lonzo Ball's injury updates are that he walked upstairs today.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
a
it's sad.
concerning way from NBA basketball for a guy who is super talented and was playing arguably the best ball of his career in Chicago when he went down. Just tough there all around. Obviously, Lonzo, we hope, is a much longer term project, but yeah, for LaMelo too. I mean, clearly he's the one guy in Charlotte. If it's the timing is unfortunate too, because you worry about what is the impact on next season. This was always a kind of a tank year anyway, though. So I guess in a way you're glad it happens now, but it's tough to see. Like we said, when your star guy goes down like that.
Are the Charlotte Hornets the most depressing team in the league?
No, because they're in the bottom 4. And
I
so
think
they
they're
have a chance.
they're the most depressing team in the league. Like when I look at Charlotte, they have the least amount of juice. Like there is nothing. You hope that you could win the lottery and get Wembanyama and all of that, like get Victor and add some juice. But like with LaMelo going down, what is there on that team? Like Gordon Hayward plays 1 every 5 games. Like there's nothing on that team that
it was Miles Bridges, and then he just was a horrible human being and beat the hell out of a woman. So like, yeah,
they're
fuck
the most
that guy,
they're the most depressing team in the NBA. Like there's no juice whatsoever, none.
Yeah, it's. Oh God!
Like I feel bad.
I don't want to bury Charlotte like this.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No,
because
I know because I'm with you. Because it's like I think about their all-time roster. I think about just like where they've been. You're right. They have LaMelo, and that's it. I mean, you're kind of at like where because the bottom 4, Detroit's got Cade. I think Houston's got a couple guys. Namely like
Charlotte's other than LaMelo, Charlotte's got nothing.
You don't like? I like Scary Terry. I don't know if he fits there right
now. Don't hurt yourself reaching. I mean, no.
I like Terry. Terry Rozier's a legit good player.
Orlando guy. I like him too.
But they gave Gordon Hayward way too much money. Yeah, again, the Bridges thing, I think, took a lot of steam out of it. He genuinely showed a lot of promise there, and then just that's out of their hands. But you're right. Yeah, I think given the current situation of the bottom, I mean, San Antonio has really nothing at this point either. Now that they've traded Pirtle. I mean, they're strictly starting from scratch, but at least they're like, that's a self-inflicted year 1 of starting over after, oh, by the way, 25 of the best years of basketball that you could, ever really ask for as a fan. Yeah.
I mean, like for Charlotte, like James Boaknight can't get out of the G League.
So
It's amazing.
It's not good. I really liked him too. I thought he had a lot of
He
potential.
came to Lakeland this year. I still like him.
It's never translated. Like the
Nope.
athleticism is there. He's just one of these guys who's super athletic, but it hasn't translated. I mean, the other teams that would stand out aren't necessarily near the bottom of the league where I'd be like, oh man, that's bleak. And Justin and I talked about this a little bit. Like, I think Washington, for example, is really bleak right now. I have no idea where Washington's going. Even with Bradley Beal in the fold, even with Porzingis having a bounce back here, like they're at 10 right now in the Eastern Conference. They paid a ton of money to a couple guys. None of their young guys have developed. You know, it just, there hasn't been much there recently. I think your Chicago Bulls, your other squad, are in a really bad spot right now.
They're in a
think
bleak spot. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, again, part of that is injury with Lonzo going down. Part of it is just not having the sense to blow things up when it clearly wasn't going that well. Like, you know, the fact that you still have guys like Alex Caruso and Andre Drummond and even like DeMar DeRozan to an extent on the roster, Vooch still after that trade. Like, I get when they went all in, I understood it in the sense, like, I didn't think they had a championship ceiling. So I guess in a vacuum, maybe you don't, but you know, I understood the thinking at least, but right now, like, yeah, this team was going nowhere fast and they basically doubled down on it instead of just blowing it up. Like, it's too late to be bad, but at least trend in that direction. Like, they don't even have, I mean, who's your best young guy there? Patrick Williams?
Yep. Don't make the playoffs. At least give yourself a chance. Like, if you're at Chicago, give yourself a chance to jump into the top 4 and keep the pick.
Yeah. I mean, because they might make the playoffs now, again, depending how it pans out with Indy and Washington and Toronto. Indy's a little tough too, but they have Hallie at least. I like Miles Turner.
Yeah.
You know, their backcourt's got some potential, I think. Beyond that, I don't think there's anybody close in the East teams that are above it. In the West, I don't really think there's anybody.
No.
Because, I mean, yeah, Utah's bad, but they're starting over. OKC has got a bunch of young talent. I mean, Portland feels like they're stuck, but at least you've got Dame.
That's the thing. Like with Charlotte, there's nothing to grab onto. Like even LaMelo. I mean, like,
no, Portland is doing the same thing for the like 12th straight year. It feels like, but Dame Lillard is without a doubt the greatest trailblazer in franchise history. So you can at least like live off nostalgia for a little bit. They for sure need to blow that
Drexler?
team up.
No, like we're not going to put Drexler.
No, I think Dame's better than Drexler now. Drexler did get them to the finals, so there is something to be said about that.
Yeah.
Dame's a scoring leader. He's had the longevity of the career there. Because Drexler played his whole career there. He ended up going to Houston and a couple other spots. I don't. It's
got
close.
Him to the finals. I don't know. Got him to the finals.
To that. Okay, is it Bill Walton then?
Well, that's a good question.
It would have been Bill Walton.
It would have. Well, yeah, with the injury.
Like without a doubt, would have been Bill. You also going to say that about Brandon Roy potentially too. But I don't need to go.
Boy,
I don't need to do that to Portland. Portland's what if.
Sorry, Portland.
Brandon Roy would have been like guaranteed. Like Odin was good too when he played the limited amount that he played. But like Brandon Roy was that guy. Like he was killer.
Does Portland have the all-time injury team for franchise?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Without a doubt.
It's them. Yeah.
Okay. I think so. Because I mean, Walton won a title. So it's a little different with him. But yeah, I mean, when you look at how much of his prime got taken away, and I know he reinvented himself as a sixth man on the Celtics, but when you look at how much of his prime got taken away.
Yeah, he's just never the same.
Yeah, I mean, a ton. I mean, Odin, obviously, recently, Roy, like we said, I don't need to keep beating this drum over and over again. But yeah, when it feels like in terms of just sheer bad luck with injuries, yeah, they definitely have to be up there without a doubt. I don't even know who would be close. But last but not least, I do want to hit one more injury. Of course, that is Jonathan Isaac. We will end on an Orlando note. You know, this is an ab tear, so it's different, at least a little bit, than from the multiple leg injuries that he's dealt with kind of here over the last few years. But I mean, here we go again, right? It's like, you know, Jonathan Isaac finally gets back. It was the icing on the cake, really, for Orlando. I think everybody, at least mentally, has kind of treated Jonathan Isaac as house money here, but you get 11 games of it, and then all of a sudden we're right back with a setback where he's got to have surgery and is out the rest of the year. Is this it? Like, what happens now?
By the way, like it's an adductor, not an abductor. So it's in his leg.
Oh,
it's a leg injury. Right.
Okay. Well, again, I am not a doctor. Okay.
Right.
Then that really changes everything. Okay.
Exactly. Like it's his left adductor. So like it's the muscle that is kind of like in your thigh. So it's in his left
Okay.
thigh, which of course leads down to the knee.
Right. Yep.
It's devastating, honestly. And I got an opportunity when Jonathan Isaac made his return, 800 days after he was in the bubble and sustained the injury. Was it 892 days or something like that?
Yeah.
Um, he came back, played in the G League for Lakeland. Dante Marcatelli and I did that game and got a chance to talk to him afterwards. And then 2 or 3 days later, he played another game after that, and I got a chance to interview him. And everyone that you talk to around the organization, it was just you're just rooting for the person, right? Jonathan Isaac, even more than the player. And the amount of work it takes to come back from these injuries, I honestly, like, I think that he has it in him to kind of continue coming back, but like there is a question at a point where it's like, is his body just not going to hold up? And I have like I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but it's sad, it's disappointing, from a fan perspective. And I'm sure from an individual. I mean, if you're Jonathan, like your body keeps betraying you. When he has been healthy and has been on a basketball court, he has excelled, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And he had, really refined his offense in terms of a mid-range jumper. His footwork looked so good. Like, I was so excited to see Jonathan Isaac knock some rust off this year and then go into next year, at full go. And I'm not quite sure what the timetable is. I mean, with this kind of injury, it kind of is a wait and see type of situation. But, once again, it's another lower body injury for a big, long man. It's concerning.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, among the just natural, of course, feeling bad because he's still a young kid who's just had so much of this robbed at this point. It was the fact that, he was objectively good when he plays. Like we said, defends 1 through 5, really started to show the offensive touch, especially the year before he got hurt in the bubble. I know it's a what if in hindsight, probably shouldn't have played in the bubble, but yeah, it's just another setback. And now it is. We are officially at the point where it's like, yeah, is this over? And I think that we were already toying with that a little bit last year, but I think, it was just everything was trending in the right direction. And once he got back on the court, like you said, just see a few games, see how happy he was, see how excited the team was to have him back. Like, it just felt like he was a member of the team. And I mean, this is a guy who was Orlando's crown jewel at one point. Like, we know Paulo is now, but I mean, for a while, like, he was the guy. He was the, really the first one. It was him and Markel who got the big paydays. Like, this was a foundational piece, and it's really a shame. And like I said, the Magic have a bright young future. They're going to be fine. But I mean, it just really is a shame because of how good he, I think, could have been.
I think that bright young future, though, enables you to maybe hold on to him a little bit longer than you could have. If Franz didn't turn into what it looks like he's going to, and Paulo and the rest of that group, like, I don't know. If I were a general manager, I'd have a hard time letting him go. It's why I'm not a GM. It's too tantalizing. He gave you just enough of a tease this year too to make you hold on to him.
What would you get for him at this point? Like, that's the thing.
Nothing. You're releasing him. Yeah.
No, so that's the thing is, like, I don't let him go for free. If there's any, and I agree to the extent, like you said, the timeline, and with these guys being younger and there being no pressure, there is no real, like, push on Isaac to contribute immediately. Yeah, I think you hold on to him, and I think you try to, you take another off season, you try to get him back, and you hope at the beginning of the season that he's ready to roll. You weren't playing for anything anyway. And you see what you can get at this point. But yeah, I think because there aren't expectations, you're right. I do think this is a rare situation where it benefits him probably. Like, he's not worried about fighting for a roster spot. It's not like where you're filling out a playoff rotation. It's like, no, that end of the bench spot may matter here for a little bit. They kind of have the potential. And the reason why is even with all the injuries, like you said, because of how talented he's been at times, he'll get that benefit of the doubt just more than some other guys might. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Appreciate you guys as always. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We'll read them on the podcast, Stitcher, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music. If you want to find us anywhere else, watch the show on YouTube, the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Appreciate my friend Nick Gryniewicz at GetNickG on Twitter, play-by-play voice of the Lakeland Magic, for filling in today for Justin. Justin will be back next week, so stay tuned for that if we were super missing him for some reason. But again, thanks to my good pal Nick for filling in. And we will talk to you guys soon.